During the Cold War, superpowers designed experimental, highly classified weapons that sound like pure science fiction. 1961, Nevada testing grounds. A devastating atomic weapon small enough to fit inside a standard military jeep.
The Davy Crockett was a recoilless rifle that fired a miniaturized, highly unstable nuclear warhead.
It gave a tiny three-man squad the terrifying ability to neutralize an entire armored battalion instantly.
But this ultimate tactical advantage came with a deeply terrifying, fatal design flaw.
The weapon's maximum firing range was dangerously short. Incredibly, the lethal radiation radius was actually wider.
Firing the device almost guaranteed the brave operators would be completely overwhelmed by their own blast.
The military abandoned the pocket nuke, but they were already secretly designing something completely alien.
Number 9. The military secretly built a highly classified saucer. Panicked citizens reported UFO sightings, but this alien craft was completely engineered by desperate human scientists. The Avrocar was designed to perfectly replace conventional helicopters, moving infantry troops at supersonic speeds.
But the physics failed. The craft became violently unstable just a few feet off the ground.
The secret saucer was quietly eliminated from funding. The dream of a flying fortress vanished into history. Number 8. 1966, the Caspian Sea. A massive Soviet ghost ship. It was an Ekroplan, a bizarre hybrid vehicle that hovered entirely on a thick cushion of pressurized air. US intelligence panicked. They saw a terrifying craft, larger than a jumbo jet, moving at impossible speeds. Heavily armed with nuclear missiles, this monster could vanish under radar. But it harbored a devastating weakness. A sudden shift in ocean weather could cause catastrophic aerodynamic failure, dropping the giant instantly into the sea.
The Soviets built massive sea monsters, but the American CIA focused entirely on the terrifying art of silent elimination.
Number 7. 1975, Washington, D.C. The CIA developed a silent weapon that left absolutely zero trace behind. It fired a tiny, frozen dart filled with a lethal biological agent, completely undetectable to the human eye. The victim would feel nothing but a faint mosquito bite before their heart was suddenly and completely overwhelmed.
The frozen dart rapidly melted inside the body, leaving investigators completely baffled by the sudden, natural-looking tragedy.
Pure paranoia infected the capital. Anyone walking down the street could be targeted without a single warning sound.
The shocking weapon was exposed during a congressional hearing, forcing the agency to surrender the terrifying prototype.
But while spies stalked the streets, military engineers were aiming a devastating new sci-fi weapon directly at the stars. Number 6. 1950s, low Earth orbit. The military plotted to drop massive tungsten rods directly from space. Nicknamed rods from God, these telephone-sized projectiles would strike the Earth at incredible orbital velocities. The kinetic impact would unleash the devastating force of a nuclear weapon, but without any radioactive fallout. Underground bunkers would be instantly overwhelmed. There was absolutely no defense against an attack from the stars. The sheer psychological terror of an invisible sword hanging over the entire world paralyzed enemy intelligence. Space weapons were incredibly expensive, but experimenting on the fragile human mind was terrifyingly cheap. Behind closed doors, the agency began a deeply disturbing project that completely shattered human consciousness. Number 5. 1953, Langley, Virginia. They tried to weaponize the human mind. They believed they could program ordinary citizens to become involuntary, perfectly obedient sleeper agents. Subjects were overwhelmed with experimental chemicals and hypnotic audio loops for weeks in total isolation. The psychological damage was devastating. Innocent people completely lost their memories and their minds. The terrifying truth was that anyone could be a test subject without ever realizing it. When exposed, the agency frantically destroyed the evidence, leaving the true scope of the tragedy forever buried.
While mind control failed, intelligence agencies turned their sci-fi ambitions toward highly unusual biological surveillance.
Number 4, 1967, Washington, D.C. They spent millions transforming a living cat into a cyborg surveillance drone.
Surgeons secretly implanted a tiny microphone inside its ear and an antenna deep along its spine.
But on its very first field mission, the cyborg animal encountered an enemy they never planned for.
Millions of dollars and years of advanced surgical research were instantly overwhelmed by a random city taxi. The bizarre experiment proved that biological cyborgs were far too unpredictable for high-stakes international espionage. But the military's obsession with science fiction wasn't over. They turned their focus to extreme chemical warfare. Number 3, 1994, Wright Laboratory, Ohio. The military proposed a chemical weapon that sounds utterly unbelievable. They researched a powerful aphrodisiac designed to cause irresistible chemical attraction among enemy troops.
The bizarre theory was that overwhelming biological urges would instantly break enemy morale and discipline.
It was the ultimate non-lethal weapon concept, defeating an entire army using sheer psychological and chemical confusion. The project was eventually dismissed as scientifically impossible, and the strange documents were quietly locked away.
Chemicals couldn't break the enemy, so the military decided to weaponize the actual sky above them.
Imagine controlling the weather itself, turning rain and mud into an overwhelming, unstoppable tactical force.
Number 2, weaponizing the monsoon rain itself. Wait for 1.
Declassified squadrons flew directly into massive storms, dispersing special chemical agents to artificially extend the monsoon season.
Their mission was to completely wash out enemy supply lines, creating impassable terrain through sheer meteorological force. The results were devastating. Entire roads were erased, and enemy logistics were severely paralyzed by the endless rain. Nature itself became the ultimate adversary. The psychological exhaustion of unending storms slowly broke their resolve. It was the first documented use of environmental warfare, proving that humans could successfully command the elements. Traditional defenses were completely useless. You cannot shoot down a storm or negotiate with a flood.
The project caused such international alarm that the United Nations eventually banned weather manipulation in warfare entirely.
The skies were declared off-limits. But the most terrifying project of the Cold War was waiting below. A weapon so apocalyptic, its own creators realized it could easily end all life on Earth.
Number 1, 1957, Nevada Test Site, Project Pluto.
It wasn't just a missile. It was an unshielded nuclear reactor designed to fly endlessly at supersonic speeds. But the payload wasn't the worst part. The unshielded engine spewed a constant, devastating wake of lethal radiation.
After dropping its warheads, it was programmed to simply circle the globe, endlessly poisoning the Earth until it crashed.
The perfect Doomsday device. A weapon of absolute destruction. The Pentagon eventually realized that if they actually launched Pluto, there would be absolutely nothing left to defend. The project was officially terminated in 1964. The ultimate sci-fi nightmare was permanently locked away in the desert. But the terrifying legacy of these Cold War experiments leaves us with a deeply unsettling question today. If they built these unbelievable weapons 60 years ago, what exactly are they building right now?
Project Pluto was just one of countless heavily classified programs buried deep in government archives.
The Cold War was fundamentally a silent conflict, fought entirely in the shadows of human imagination.
Superpowers pushed science to its absolute limits, constantly preparing for a devastating apocalyptic scenario. Today, These classified blueprints serve as a chilling reminder of how close we came to the edge.
We survived the 20th century, but the dark evolution of tactical warfare never actually stops.
As we face tomorrow, the greatest sci-fi weapons are likely already quietly orbiting above us right now.
Don't get left behind when the next siren wails. Subscribe to War Cinema 4K now.